Revelation 22. So how many people like to read? All right. Carla likes to read if there's a lot of pictures. Yeah, large print and lots of pictures. But you say you like to read. What kinds of things do you like to read? All right, history. All right, anybody else besides history? Anybody like mysteries? Okay, so people like different things, right? Nope, that's what makes the world go around. We all like different things, different kinds of reading. Reading is important. But I did some research about reading. All right? So let me share this with you. According to the Pew Research Foundation, 64% of Americans say they've read a book in the past 12 months. All right? How many people read a book in the past 12 months? The National Endowment for the Arts released a report that said reading among Americans has declined significantly over the past 20 years. In 1992, 56% of Americans had read at least one work of literature in that year. By 2014, that number had dropped to 46%. They also found that in 2014, 53% of adults over age 65 reported reading different types of literature, while people between the ages of 18 and 24, only 36% of those read. So, the American Time Use Survey from the Bureau of Labor Statistics said Americans aged 15 and older spent 7 minutes a day reading in 2017. 7 minutes a day. And in 2014, it was 9 minutes. So the statistics suggest that people are reading less. So then I got to wondering, how does that compare to the Bible? What about people reading the Bible? In the 1980s, 73% of Americans said they read the Bible, at least occasionally. Today, it's 59%. People that read the Bible at least once a week. In the 1990s, it was 40%. Today, it's 37%. People that read the Bible every day, only 16% say they read the Bible every day. 12% say they read it monthly. 10% say they read it less than monthly. And 41% say they rarely ever read the Bible. Yet, now this is the shocking statistic, 65% of Americans agree that the Bible has the answers to the most basic questions of life. 65% say that. Yet 41% say they never read the Bible or very rarely read the Bible. 28% of those who agree with the statement that the Bible has all the answers that we need to life's most basic questions, 28% say they never read the Bible. If you believe the book has the answers to life, why don't you read it? So that's sort of what prompted all of that was today's text. Now, when we started this series on the beatitudes in the book of Revelation, we started with Revelation 1:3. And Revelation 1:3 said, "Blessed is he who reads, who hears, and who keeps the words of this prophecy." Now that's the introduction to the book of Revelation. Now we're coming to the final chapter. In fact, the basic story of the book of Revelation is over, and these are some final tie up the loose end comments in our text today, which is Revelation 22:7, and it says this, "Behold, I am coming quickly. Blessed or happy is he who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book." Now that's very similar to the one in the very beginning. So, blessed is he who keeps the words of the prophecy of this book. Is the thought in today. Why do we have Revelation 1:3 and Revelation 22 verse 7 saying almost the same thing? Well, they're like bookends to the story. We started with, all right, you're going to be blessed, you're going to be happy if you read, if you hear, and if you keep the words of this prophecy. So, they've gone through the story that takes place through the book of Revelation. And through these beatitudes, we've been able to hit some of the key points of what that story is all about. But now it's like this. All right, you've heard the story, so keep it. That's the idea. That's part of his concluding thoughts. You've heard the story, now keep it, and you'll be happy. One thing's for certain. There's no other book in the Bible that guarantees the blessings for reading and keeping the words of the prophecy like the book of Revelation. So let's take our verse, Revelation 22 verse 7, and I want to take it apart just a little bit, basically focusing on one word. One word. All right? But let's read it again. And behold, I am coming quickly. Blessed is he who heeds in the New American Standard, but keeps is actually the Greek word, the words of the prophecy of this book. So, let's focus on that word keeps. Now actually, because of the tense of the verb there, it would be translated better with keeping. Keeping. Happy is the one who is keeping the words of this prophecy. All right? So keeping, what does it mean? And I looked up the Greek word and I found all the different meanings that go with it. And so they're actually the points of my sermon this morning. So pay attention to the points and you'll find the meaning of the word. Keeping is obeying. Keeping is obeying. This word keep is one of John's favorite words. In John 14:15, you see Jesus saying, if you love me, keep my commandments. The prophecy, and that's Jesus speaking, behold, I'm coming quickly. Blessed is he who keeps the words of this prophecy. Romans 6:16 says, don't you know that when you present yourselves as servants and obey someone, you are servants of whomever you obey, whether it is sin to death or of obedience to righteousness. Now, isn't that what the book of Revelation has been about? The struggle between the sin that leads to death and the obedience that follows righteousness. You got the dragon versus the king. That's the Satan versus Jesus. That sin that leads to death or righteousness that leads to heaven. That's the story of the whole book of Revelation. And the whole idea is that the good guys win. You know, you could almost pit it in Western days. You got the guys that wear the black hats and the guys that wear the white hats. And the guys that wear the white hats are the good ones, and they're the ones that always win in those old Westerns. Right? And that's what the book of Revelation is really about. So loyalty to Christ should prevent us from crossing the line going back into the sin that leads to death. If we're truly loyal, if we're truly His servant, we should not go back and cross that line. But then Jesus talked to the church at Laodicea. Remember the 7 churches in chapters 2 and 3. The church at Laodicea, that letter is the most unusual one because Jesus finds nothing good to say about them. In fact, what he does say is in Revelation 3:15 and 16, I know your works, that you are neither cold nor hot, and I wish you were cold or hot. So because you are lukewarm and neither hot nor cold, I will vomit you out of my mouth. Who likes to drink something lukewarm when it's supposed to be hot or it's supposed to be cold? You know? Iced tea is supposed to be cold, right? But you let it sit out and let all that ice melt, let it get lukewarm. Is it good? Just take your coffee and set it out, let it get cold. Get it lukewarm. Is it good? No. We either want to put more ice in that iced tea and get it cold. We'll put that coffee back in the microwave and get it hot. We don't want it lukewarm. Jesus said, I don't want you to be lukewarm. There's an interesting image that's behind what John is writing there. Because Laodicea's water was pumped from a hot spring that was 5 miles south of Laodicea. So by the time it arrived in Laodicea, it was lukewarm and not very useful. Something you'd want to spit out. But now Colossae, who was close to Laodicea, had cold springs nearby, and they got refreshing water. And the hot springs of Hierapolis, which was nearby, were healing. And so Jesus is making a point. Cold is refreshing, hot was healing, and lukewarm was useless. That was the church at Laodicea. Now, what happened to the church at Laodicea? Why did it get that way? There are basically 2 distractions Jesus talks about for the church at Laodicea. The first one is wealth. Revelation 3:17 says, you say I'm rich and I have everything I want. I don't need a thing. And you don't recognize that you are wretched and miserable and poor and blind and naked. Wealth was the first distraction. The second distraction was culture. Look at Revelation 3:18. I counsel you to buy from me gold refined by fire, that you may become rich, and white garments, that you may clothe yourself, and that the shame of your nakedness may not be revealed, and the eye salve to anoint your eyes, so that you may see. Now, here instead of the black hats and the white hats, we've got the black garments and the white garments. Culture. Laodicea was known for the black wool that it produced. And they made their clothing with this black wool. And so they wore black coats, black robes. And they thought they were wealthy and had no need of anything. And in their culture, that black wool represented, I am somebody. And Jesus said, no, you're naked. You need white garments. You need my righteousness. But you're not living for me because you're trying to impress the world with the way you are and the wealth that you have. Let me ask you a question. Does that sound like today? Are wealth and culture 2 of the biggest distractions the church today has to face? I'd say so. I'd say that's a real issue, a real problem. And we can get so distracted by those things that are keeping the words of this prophecy kind of fade away. Because I don't need anything. I've got it all. I'm rich. I'm dressed in the finest clothing. I've got all the money I need. I don't need anybody. That's where a lot of people in the world are. But that's not what Jesus wants. A lukewarm, apathetic faith is not an obedient faith. But what it is repulsive to Jesus. The faith we need is the kind of faith Jehoshaphat had. Go back in 2 Chronicles. The Moabites, the Ammonites had gotten together. They were coming against Jerusalem. They were coming to attack. And the people of Judah were afraid. And Jehaziel stood up and said, "The Lord says you don't need to be afraid or let this powerful army discourage you. God will fight on your side. You don't even have to fight. Just take your positions and watch, and the Lord will rescue you." So Jehoshaphat, the king, led the people in prayer. And he concluded his prayer with these words: "We don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you." Wow. That's important words. The prophet said, you don't even have to fight, just take your place and watch, and the Lord will do the fighting. And Jehoshaphat said, we don't know what to do, but our eyes are on you. And you know, we cannot be obedient to the Lord unless our eyes are on Him and not on the distractions that this world offers. We've got to serve Him. So keeping is obeying. But keeping is also enduring. We have to finish what we started. We have to finish what we started. The end of Revelation 2:10 says, "Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life." Be faithful unto death, and I will give you the crown of life. Now, we have to understand that in the context of the verse. In the whole verse, Jesus said, don't be afraid of what you're about to suffer. You might go to prison. You might be oppressed. You may even die for the cause of Christ. But you have to finish what you started. You ever heard the phrase, keep the ball rolling? You ever wonder where that came from? Keep the ball rolling? Well, it came from a U.S. presidential election in 1840. That election set up a lot of even modern day campaign songs, advertising slogans, publicity stunts of all sorts of things. You see, Martin Van Buren was president. He wasn't very popular. Put him against the Whig candidate, General William Harrison, a war hero that fought the Shawnee Indians at Tippecanoe. And John Tyler was his vice president, and hence the song Tippecanoe and Tyler too. Yeah, you've heard that probably somewhere. But Harrison's campaign literature referred to victory balls. And we would think, well, that's this big, nice, formal dance that people throw when they have great victories. No, on the screen is a victory ball. It was 10 foot in diameter. It was made out of tin and leather. And what they did with this victory ball was they would have a campaign rally in this town, say here in Lynchburg, all right? And let's say they're going to go to Danville next, and somebody would roll that ball from Lynchburg all the way to Danville before the campaign rally to keep the ball rolling as they gained in popularity and influence. All right, but think about keeping the ball rolling. Okay? We became Christians to help in that process of keeping the ball rolling. Because how many volunteers did they need to help roll that thing through all the different places that they would go? But down through the ages, Christians have joined the faith, or people have joined the faith, become Christians, and they want to keep the ball rolling. We want to keep it going. We want to have the victory. But we live in a dark place. Philippians 2:14 and 15 says, "Do all things without complaining and arguing, so that you may become blameless and harmless, children of God without defect, in the middle of a crooked and perverse generation, among whom you are seen in the world as lights." We're supposed to be the lights in the world. We're supposed to be the ones reflecting the light of Christ in this world. And so when a lot of people outside the world know we claim to be Christians, they're looking. Are we truly living the Christian faith? Are we doing the things that are pleasing to God? And if we are doing the things that are pleasing to God, there's going to be a lot of people in the world that are upset with us. They're not going to like it, because we're shining the light on the darkness in this world. So we have to be the light in a dark world, but how do we do it? Number one is by the way we live. It's not the popular thing to be a Christian and to take your stand on God's world in this crooked and perverse generation. Okay, people just do not like you when you do that. But we have to. By the way that we worship. Now, when I talk about worship, I'm not talking about what we're doing right now. I'm not talking about the singing we just did. I'm not even talking about meeting around the Lord's table. But the way we worship goes back to the way that we live. Because the book of Romans, Paul says that we have to be transformed by the renewing of our minds and no longer conformed to the ways of this world. That's our spiritual worship. When we look at the world, we need to see the evil for what it is and not want to be a part of it. We need to be the light in this world that wants to change it. And we've got to tell the world that we are a living sacrifice that is holy and acceptable to God. That's our spiritual worship. A living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God. And if we are doing that, the world's not going to like it. But there's one more thing. How are we going to live that kind of life? By what we're focused on. By what we are focused on. When we started that verse today, that's our beatitude, we're happy as he who keeps the words of this prophecy. But what did it say right before that? It said, "Behold, I am coming quickly." And I said, we're in those concluding thoughts in the book of Revelation. It says, "Behold, I am coming quickly." Again, in Revelation 22:12, it says, "Behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me to repay each man according to his work." And then in verse 20 it says, "He who testifies these things says, Yes, I come quickly." Amen. Yes, come, Lord Jesus. Now the question is this: do we believe that? Do we believe that today might be the day that Jesus appears? See, if you say, "No, I don't believe it's today," watch out, because He comes at an hour when you think not. So you need to think every day might be the day that Jesus is going to appear. Do you ever stop, just pause and look at the clouds? I do that quite frequently. Number one, I like the clouds. They're beautiful. But number two, I'm expecting someone coming from out of those clouds. I'm looking for Him. And I've said it my whole life, and I'm going to say it again. I believe before I die, I will see Him come. I believe that. Because this world keeps getting worse. It doesn't get better. And we've got to let the world know He's coming. And why is He coming? He's coming, number one, to repay each man according to his work. Well, if I believe He's coming, and I believe that He's coming to repay for what we've done, then don't I want to live my life for Him and be the light in this world that the world doesn't want to see? We've got to take our stand in this world, in the midst of this crooked and perverse generation. Some will say, "Well, that's tough work. That's next to impossible." Guess what? The early Christians did it. In less than 300 years, they conquered the Roman Empire and made Christianity the official religion of the Roman Empire. They did it. Why can't we? If our trust is in Him, if we're obeying His Word, if we're enduring to the end, we can do it. We can do it. But one more thought. Keeping is to protect, to watch over, to guard. All of these words are in that definition of the word keep. Protect, watch over, guard. Proverbs 7:2 says, "Keep my commandments and live. Guard my teaching as the apple of your eye." The apple of your eye. Well, what's the apple of your eye? We've all heard that phrase. What's the apple of your eye? What's the pupil? It's the part that opens and closes so you can focus and see things. But what part of your body, more than any other, you want to protect? In your eye? Now, we've got to work on protecting our eyes. That's important. But it's a proverbial expression saying that we're supposed to guard and protect anything that's important. And in Proverbs particularly, it named the teaching. The teaching. Jude said that he wrote his epistle to encourage us to contend for the faith once delivered to the saints. That's our job. That's our job. To get the idea of the faith out, to contend for the faith that was once delivered for the saints. We're talking about New Testament Christianity. Plain, simple, New Testament Christianity. We're talking about that in our adult Bible class this morning, how hard everybody wants to make Christianity. How hard they want to make church. It's meant to be plain and simple. The early church was very plain and very simple. And that's the message we got to carry. We got to contend for that faith of the New Testament church. Folks, we got the greatest message in the world. We just need to get it out there. We need to share it. And we got more ways now to share it than ever before. You know, get the word out. Do those little things to help get the word out about our church so we can get the word out about the message of Christ and what New Testament Christianity is all about. All right? And then Proverbs 4:23, keep your heart with all diligence, for out of it is the wellspring of life. It's one of the most memorized verses of the Bible. And the reason is obvious. We got to keep our hearts. We got to guard. We got to watch. We got to protect our hearts to make sure they're always on God's side and living for Him. So the word to keep means to obey, to endure, to protect, to watch over, to guard. And Jesus said the person that does that is happy. So we're going to conclude with Solomon's conclusion. Ecclesiastes 12:13. This is the end of the matter. All has been heard. Fear God and keep His commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. So, what about you today? Are you keeping the words of the prophecy? Because that's what we're told to do. How are you going to keep the words of the prophecy if you don't read it? We got to read it. We got to know what it says. We got to know those commandments, those instructions about what it is to live in the end times, the last days. The last days started on the day of Pentecost. So we're living in them. Waiting for Jesus. And that book of Revelation has those instructions, those prophecies, those commandments. So we can live for Him. But that question, are you living for Him? Are you keeping the words of the prophecy? Or do you have a decision you need to make for Christ?